Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story. It's Tuesday. We're in the book of Obadiah. I guess I could say the chapter of Obadiah. I don't know when y'all. Some Bibles say, will you call it chapter 1 and then give you verses. Others do not put a numeric value on the single chapter because it's only a chapter. How do y'all refer? When you refer to Obadiah, do you just say like Obadiah verse whatever, or?
Yeah, if I were teaching or preaching from it, I would just say Obadiah, whatever the verse is, just for reference purposes. But it's not like you can get too far off. It'd be one of those things if you ask people to read the first 3 chapters of Obadiah, and you come back Sunday and ask them how many read the first 3 chapters, and they respond. See how many folks you can kind of catch them.
It reminds when I was at my first church, I had a gentleman. He was special, and one night he was, I don't remember, he was testifying, giving a prayer request, and sometimes you couldn't tell the difference. But he said, as it says in the Bible, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. And when he started, I'm thinking, that ain't in the Bible. So my response to him was, that's in the book of Hezekiah. And he said, yep, that's exactly right.
That's it.
And I was like, yeah, well, all right, whatever. Yeah, exactly. Bless his heart. The book of Obadiah, we gave you the summary. So it's about Edom and Judah and this battle between the two that is a long-standing feud. It is the result, we went back, you go back to Jacob and Esau, like that's kind of the beginnings of where you see this feud starting that goes on for generations. I don't know if you guys have ever had any experience with generational feuds or not. Long-standing family feuds. But I have known more than one in my life. Like just difficult situations. So for what are some of the dangers of family feuds, period, and long-standing family feuds?
I mean, obviously they're very divisive.
And I know you got to be careful when we're talking about these things if you give examples so you don't.
So you don't give away anybody.
Right.
I find it, I do find it humorous. It's sad, but it's humorous too, because at a certain point, those family feuds seem to go on. And if you were to inquire with the younger generations a part of it, they probably couldn't even tell you.
They don't know why.
They don't even know why.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
They just
it's like an inherited hate almost.
Yeah, it's been modeled.
And I believe hate is inherited.
Yeah, it certainly can be.
Yeah,
it can be so modeled for you and repetitive that I think it just becomes a part of who you are. Unfortunately, it'd be no different than teaching a good characteristic. You're displayed a really horrible example, and and then they can't even tell you why. Sound like the Hatfield McCoys.
What is the cause of most of them, in your experience?
Betrayal. What people see as betrayal seems to be the number one thing.
I think misunderstandings, just difference of opinion on things that probably weren't so big to start with, but either the lack of skill set to have a conversation and just, even if you need to agree to disagree, or the unwillingness to have a conversation to just kind of get things out there, I think fester and become big things.
Just piles up after that.
I mean, that's no different in a marriage relationship, in a bigger family dynamic. It can happen. It does happen in churches, where it starts small and it's never addressed or dealt with, and it just grows and multiplies.
Can you give an example without
giving
them up?
I mean, I have known and I can't name the exact family right now, but I remember actually having a conversation about it recently. And it was a family who, I think it was brothers, who hadn't literally not spoken in probably 20 years. And whenever somebody tried to explain to me what the reason was, I was like, are you serious? Yeah. That is the reason. It seemed something that was so small, but apparently it felt really big to them at the time. And I guess sometimes in those situations, it could be like the straw that breaks the camel's back. Somebody's just been putting up with it for so many years, and then eventually they get to the point where they're like, okay, that's it. I'm done. Mm-hmm. And it could have just been that one thing that finally tipped this, right. They said, I can't do this anymore. I don't know.
Without picking a specific event, for me, it's manifest itself. You see the results of these conflicts oftentimes as a result of a death in a family. Mm-hmm. A funeral, for instance, seems to bring out whatever has been,
if they're there, it's coming
That's
out.
What I'm saying. Whatever's been there, what's festered, whether it's ever been talked about or not, or attempts to be made or not, and I think often they have not been, and all of a sudden this event magnifies those things. That one seems to be treated differently, or at least the perception is, or this belongs to
true.
me, and it's just this huge tension, and sometimes you see that. I mean, can be ugly.
Yeah, the worst tensions that I have seen usually come about because of death. And often it is the person dying is either the single thread that's been able to hold everything together, and then they disappear and everybody's like, it's on now, or they are the person who created all the havoc and they die, and there's no way to resolve it because
it's too late.
They've left all this shrapnel for everybody, and nobody knows how to deal with it. Sometimes it's personality, sometimes it's misunderstandings. I see it a lot around stuff and words. I've said this. If I get mad because my brother got something and I didn't, I'm an idiot. That's just, I don't know any other way to say it. Like, if I get mad because he got something and I didn't, at this point in my life. Mm-hmm. Now, when I was 25 and I wasn't mature enough, and something might would have made a difference in my family. So I, surprisingly to some people, have a little nostalgic streak. And so there are things that I like to keep. So, y'all have probably seen the piano that I recently had redone. That was my grandmother's. My aunt that just passed away, they had made a white ceramic Christmas tree that had red cardinals on it. And I had asked for it 2 Christmases ago and then just never went and picked it up. And I said something about it this past Christmas, and I went and got it, and then she just passed away in the last few weeks. And there's a tractor that was my grandfather's that I got to go pick it up. It's an old farm old Cub.
What you gonna do with that tractor?
I'm gonna have it restored.
What?
I don't know. I don't really know.
Front yard.
He's gonna put it by the pool.
By the pool. Yeah, put it by my pool. Well, I do own a farm, by the way. I might use it out there, but I mainly hope that somebody coming behind me might have something significant they want to do with it. And the piano, I knew the piano was useless as a piano, but at the funeral the other day, I remarked about the Christmas tree when I was telling about getting the Christmas tree, and some of my family said, well, I would love to have had that piano. Well, you could have got the piano. And you could have paid the money I paid to have it turned into a desk if you wanted to. That ain't what they wanted. You know, they just needed to say something, you know, and whether they're mad at, of course, they were probably talking to the wrong person to care. But, you know, I don't understand those things, but I see it all the time. I see it all the time.
I was going to say I have seen more than one occasion when a child who was minimally involved in the parent's life as they got older, especially if it was like a caretaking situation, and then they pass away, and that child tends to be the one who shows up and expects, you know, everything they want that's been left behind, and it causes conflict between the siblings because, you know, one sibling will have been the one who was taking care of that parent, who had actually been the one who helped. And I think in a lot of those situations, it's not so much about like, why do you get that stuff and I don't, as it is, why didn't you care before there was things for you to feel like you got out of it? Why couldn't you have just cared about
and sometimes
our parents?
those things are just triggers of other unresolved things behind the scene between the parties that have never been dealt with, and I'm convinced this is just the thing that they can identify in the moment. And
it corrupts children because my experience is people can't keep their mouth shut. You know, so they pass it down.
100%.
You know, we ain't going to see Uncle John. You know, whatever. If Uncle John's there, we ain't. Now there may be some legitimate reasons why. Okay, I mean, I can think of a few reasons why you wouldn't want your kids around Uncle John.
Yeah, especially on a reoccurring long-term basis.
Right. But that's rarely the case. That's what I would say. I'd say it was rarely the case. You know, I can think of situations where there were inherited children. That's how I would put it. You know, adult children. You know, so I can think of a situation where there was a man and woman that got married late in life. So she's 60, he's 70.
First time they got married?
It was her first time. Wow. He had been married, his wife was passed, and so he had a son. So, you know, at 70, he's 45, 50 years old at this point. And, you know, he dies when he's like 90. And there's this lifetime right to the house, you know, for her to stay there. And it turns into a contest. I mean, a contest. And they end up not speaking, having nothing to do. She has nothing to do with them. They have nothing to do with her. You know, I've seen, I've had to deal with a situation in the last year. And they don't live around here. They don't go to church here, so don't try to figure out who it is. But between cousins and brothers and sisters who now are not speaking. And it was over a truck that, you know, and there were interlying tensions there, you know, for years. But that just gave them the ammo to say, you know, you're a bad person. And it's one thing for me to have a problem with you. That's the thing I've always struggled with. If I have a problem with
you have with me?
No, yeah. I don't like you, Sheryl.
We'll talk later.
That's right. It won't last long.
You said no, it won't.
It's one thing for me to have a problem with you. It's another thing for me to infect my children and other people to have a problem with you.
100%.
That's the problem.
And I also think with it being family, if it's, you know, because you're talking about the family feuds and things, if you had a problem with me, eventually that's going to be easier for you to escape than it is a problem that you have with somebody in your family.
That's right.
Because that's not going to go away.
But even if I have a problem with my family, if I infect my kids with it,
or
my grandkids, that's a problem.
You see the same thing on a church level, which is, I think, ultimately how churches get to a split. Is people have conflict, and it may have been between two individuals to begin with, But that person's got to tell people and rally people to their side of the story, their opinion. This one does the same thing, and before you realize it, you've got a large contingency that are viewing this thing from their perspective, another contingency from their perspective, and you may not even know it until it's too late. Then all of a sudden, you got this huge division.
Right. That's right, and they've infected people.
Yes.
I know of a church split. Gosh, how long ago has it been? It's been a long time ago. There were 7 brothers and sisters. 6 of them went to the same church together. And the church split, and 3 of them stayed, and 3 of them left.
Mm-hmm.
And the 3 and 3 stopped speaking for at least 15 years.
Oh my!
Good gracious.
At least 15 years. It was a pretty tight family.
Sad.
Didn't do family gatherings. They just had nothing to do with each other, you know. And it started. I mean, rarely, and this is my experience. Rarely is a church split over heaven or hell issues.
Yeah, I would say very rarely.
Less than 1%.
Very rarely.
Yeah,
Yes.
less than 1%. It's usually over. I got my feelings hurt, and I'm going to infect somebody else, and so that they feel like I feel.
Yeah.
And then it becomes this, you know, if I got a problem with you, I'm gonna talk to you. If the worst thing I can do is try to infect somebody else, and family issues are the same way.
100%. Agree.
Anything else y'all want to add to this?
Nope, because I don't want it to divide us.
Well, we're going to wring all we can out of the book of Obadiah and all the other pieces to the puzzle that we can put together. So I hope you'll be back tomorrow as we continue our conversation.